Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. All right, live, Steve Gluckstein, part 2. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Back in action.
Yes, I'm a little more excited for this one. I think the last time we spoke, it was like midnight or like 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'm a little more awake this time.
Midday pep. Yeah, we talked about weightlifting and artistic gymnastics, which weightlifting, I guess, is a little bit more where you're fun, but you're like, oh, God, another
Yeah.
person asking about artistic gymnastics trampoline.
It's fine. I think at that point, at that hour after working so many hours a week, I was just like fried. But I watched it. Everything turned out okay. But I'm excited to be back on. Thank you for having me. I'm excited that you have some requests for trampoline, right?
Yeah.
That's always been a big goal of mine is to grow the sport of trampoline, right? We've always kind of been the ugly stepchild or stepsister, or the Cinderella story. Hopefully, we'll be the Cinderella story, but we've always been, pushed off to the side for women's artistic.
Mm.
So I'm happy that we're growing, and I think we'll still grow.
Yeah, it's been a good limelight, right, to try to like combat with. But yeah, we had after your episode actually there. That's when it first started coming up. With people were like, "Oh, that was cool to hear the weightlifting stuff. It was cool for artistic people to hear like what the benefits of trampoline are." But like a lot of people were like, "Okay, well, like I don't want to do artistic, or I just want to do trampoline." And I think, yeah, as you mentioned, like being kind of like maybe not as in the spotlight as artistic, women's or men's. I think a lot of people are out there in the trampoline world and they're kind of confused about like what the best progressions are, like what to do, or like they kind of like easily get tripped up. And I think that's kind of why someone had just asked 2 weeks ago if we could do like a more in-depth episode on trampoline stuff. And I was like, Steve, where's Steve? I was like, Steve and Camilla, I need them right now.
Done, done. And I think I we'll be talking a lot about like trampoline, vocabulary and progressions. But like before we get started, for those that are in artistic and maybe have a trampoline, because I was just talking to Chris Brooks yesterday, and I was FaceTiming him, and he was at his gym in Arkansas, and he had 2 trampolines. I'm like, dude,
Cool.
like, yeah, you use them? He's like, no, we're kind of scared to use them. And I'm like, and it kind of reminded me. I was talking at a clinic a couple weeks ago, a state clinic, and like I was talking about hand spotting, and everyone's like, "Ugh, I don't know," and it's like you have to start, right?
Yeah.
Like, and for those coaches that know, probably some people listening right now know exactly what I'm talking about, right? When you first start hand spotting, kind of like, "Oh, I'm nervous. I don't want to drop them. I don't know if it's right or wrong." And you kind of just have to start,
Mm.
and maybe you might drop a kid, accidentally, but that can't stop you from hand
Yeah.
spotting, right? You're
That
gonna
happens in
have
all
to
of
learn,
gymnastics.
and it's the same thing with trampoline, right? You just gotta start,
Mm.
and after a while you'll get used to it. So anyway, there's my PSA for all the artistic ladies.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I see both sides of that, right? I definitely see this is artistic, but also even on trampoline, like people who want to start a trampoline program or like places that want to have a trampoline like program be woven in a little bit, is they're nervous to start because they're worried about, like injuries or not knowing what to do or not knowing really know like fundamentally how to start someone to be safe. Whereas I think in artistic gymnastics, there's so much information out there on what progressions to do, what strength to do to make sure someone's like, okay, you can't go to this skill until you learn this, or you show this proper shape or this proper technique. I think in trampoline, and maybe it's just me being naive because I'm not as in depth like dug in the trampoline world, but I don't think there's a lot of great public information about like YouTube channels. Just go anywhere you want and find that stuff. Like artistic has so much stuff. So I understand the
Yeah.
intimidation, right? I was like that too, coaching. I'm like, Aussie bed's a little bouncier than I'd like it to be.
Yeah. I think it's true. In under the USA Gymnastics website, we have like nuggets of knowledge,
Mm.
and we have like videos, like little whatever 1 to 3 minute videos, but it's nothing that can like walk you through progressions from A to Z.
Mm. Yeah.
So you're right. It's tough, but hopefully I can with this podcast I can hope maybe clear some of that up.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think last time we spoke, we touched on briefly about your obviously your experience as a high level athlete going to the Olympics and stuff. But can you tell people where you are now in like a coaching role and what your position is now?
So I stopped competing in 2016. I've been a coach since 2004. I started coaching, so I was a coach and athlete at the same time. And then when I stopped competing in 2016 after the Rio Olympics, I took on coaching full time. And I coach right now at Elite Trampoline Academy. It's in Middletown, New Jersey. And after I stopped competing, I also took on the position as the junior national team coordinator. So we're one of the top ranked training facilities in the country for trampoline. We currently just came back from the World Age Group competition, which is essentially the almost like the Junior World Championships,
Mhm.
where in 2019 the United States took home 4 medals, and in 2021 we took home I think 12,
Oh, cool.
and four of them were from Elite Trampoline Academy.
Hey.
So yeah, so our program's growing, and I'm trying to grow the national team as well. Um, you know, it's a difficult one because trampoline's not a collegiate, so it's like I try to help share the knowledge and build and build and build, and then they go to college, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
it's
it's
tricky.
tough, but it's my passion, and regardless if they stick around, I still want to teach and share. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and then obviously we have to give a shout out to Camilla, married to the wonderful Camilla, who is still actively trampolining, right? How's she doing?
Yes, she's good. She just came back from the World Championships. She had her best qualification ever. She was sixth going into the semifinals. Then she had a little mistake in the semifinals, and I think she finished like 13th or 14th
Mhm.
at Worlds. So it was tough for her because I think this is now her like third or fourth time finishing 14th.
Mm.
So it's
Cool.
yeah, but her qualifications was awesome. She was sixth in the world on that day. So yeah, she's going to be training for another 2.5, 3 more years, trying to go for Paris.
Woo, man, that'd be a fun trip.
Yeah, right. Hopefully we'll get to go to this one. Hopefully
Absolutely.
we'll have
Shout out Camilla.
spectators.
We love you. Yeah, so let's get into this now, right? So I think the best way to frame the
Yeah.
podcast is I think probably start with the first half is go more like kind of basics, introductory, rudimentary for those that are kind of like maybe working the lower levels or are starting a program or trying to figure out like how they can maybe revamp their program to make it really, really good and high
hmm
quality. And then we'll spend the last half the podcast on the fun stuff, which is what everybody wants to know, which is like the super high level stuff and like, national level stuff, all that kind of stuff. So let's start with just first. So let's kind of go with what are some of like the fundamentals or things that like that like you did growing up that were super helpful as like a really young athlete, but also like when you're teaching new coaches or have new kids that come to your gym and are like, oh, I want to do this and possibly be competitive. Like, what is the base level ground stuff that you have to be kind of mastering before you even think about harder skills?
So I mean, this might not be like the flashy, awesome answer that everyone wants to hear. But it I think the issue with a lot of trampoline teams that want to be successful at the higher level is they try to build to the higher level before their foundation is built, and their foundation is built actually off of the trampoline,
Mm,
right? So if you add up, right, so one routine is 10 consecutive skills, right? Let's say they're jumping about 15 seconds for that routine, right? You add that up, let's say they practice their routine 10 times a day, that's 150 seconds, right?
mm,
150 seconds, that's what, 2.5 minutes,
yeah.
right? So they spend 2.5 minutes training for their muscle memory, their technique, right? And they're yelling corrections at the kids, and they're trying to make them do this and that and the other, and it's like, well, that's great. How long do you spend warming up? How long do
Mm,
you spend cooling down? How long do you spend conditioning? And I feel like that foundation is not built in the TNT community as well as it should be, right? There
mm,
should be no reason why an elite athlete is bending their knees on an opening for any skill, right? If they're bending their knees for any reason, right, then that means that foundation was not built. Their muscle memory, so to speak, is not there.
mm,
So I think a lot of the foundation is missing out on drills on the floor, right? And gymnastics, artistic gymnastics knows that all too well, right?
mm.
They call it, most people, coaches call it shaping,
Yeah.
right? But just teaching coordination drills, right, on the floor, as simple as laying on the ground, right? I'm sure everyone has done this one before, where you call out one, they swing their arms over their head, right, to mimic the arm swing on the trampoline. They call out two, coach calls out two, they bring their knees to their chest, showing the tightest tuck they could possibly do. Coach calls out three, right, and they slide and finish that opening, that kick out position on the floor, right? And then doing the same thing on the bars, right? You could do on parallel bars, holding onto the parallel bars, going upside down, showing a shape upside down, showing an opening upside down. Um, Something as simple as going to a resi mat, run, jump forward, roll, and then shoot to flat back, right? A
Mm,
lot of people do handstand flat back, but they're not doing their rolls to flat back.
mm,
As simple as forward rolls on the floor, right? So how often most people will do the forward rolls on the floor, but how often are they grabbing their knees to their chest,
mm,
showing the tuck position that they would like to see in a double or a triple, front. And then a lot of times what they're doing that I feel like that the gymnasts are missing out is that finishing position, right? So one thing that I'm pretty strict on it is finishing the roll in the arms down position, right? So in artistic, a lot of skills are finishing arms up, right? Whether you're reaching for the bars or something, you do a forward roll, you reach for the next roll, right?
Mm.
Or you're reaching for a dive roll. Whereas in trampoline, I'll have them forward roll, grab their knees, stand up, and slide their arms down by their side to mimic that opening position with their arms by their side.
Right.
And so just repetition, repetition, repetition before you even get on the trampoline. So I know it's not the flashy answer that everyone wanted, but that's the secret. It's the boring stuff. And it's not so boring if you push yourself as a coach to try to find new ways to do the same thing,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, make it interesting for the kids.
Yeah, as simple as, like, I'll say, okay, forward roll, stand up, arms down by their side. They're like, oh, this again, right? But if I say forward roll, stand up, arms by your side, straight jump as high as you can over this rope or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's where it's the coach's job to get creative
Mm.
and make the same thing look like something different.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong too, but I feel like in trampoline, it's so like the margin for error is so high because like bouncing is literally the main fundamental, right? In gymnastics and artistic stuff, you have like tap swings, handstands, running, roundhouse, like there's tumbling, there's acro, there's all sorts of
Right.
stuff that you have, and it makes it harder, obviously, to master those basics. But in trampoline, if you screw up the one basic position of jumping, it's going to make everything so
Right.
much harder.
Yeah, exactly. And we in at this level, we're also talking about, right, double mini trampoline and power tumbling as well. In our gym specifically, because the only Olympic event is trampoline, that once they become an elite, the athletes can choose if
Mhm.
they want to compete in all around, right, double mini and tumbling, or specifically just focus on trampoline. But at that lower level, they will be doing various exercises for tumbling as well, which differ from trampoline, right? In trampoline, we want to avoid putting our feet in front in the hollow position,
Yeah.
leaning backwards. Um, but what we'll normally do, because we kind of have a pathway for them to be trampolinist more so than tumbling, we'll teach these fundamentals for trampoline first before we teach the shaping for tumbling.
Mm.
And then, they'll start to learn, that feet in front hollow position, pushing back for the power tumbling.
Mm. Yeah, good points. And with like the conditioning stuff you mentioned, like a lot of time off the trampoline obviously is spent conditioning and getting their bodies ready to handle the forces. I mean, the forces on the tramp
Yeah.
are astronomical. So aside from some of the more stuff that people might deal with traditional gymnastic stuff, which is like core stuff and shaping stuff you mentioned, but is there other stuff specific to trampoline that you think is underutilized a lot for conditioning or for strength work that people should be spending more time on before they just bounce a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the main things that I feel like people have already kind of been exposed to since your podcast and my Instagram and Camila's Instagram and all these top gymnasts is right, these explosive movements, such as Olympic weightlifting.
Mm.
And the thing is, people are like, oh well, I'm gonna wait until they're an elite, or till they're older, till they're if they've hit puberty to start that. And it's like, no, that's
Yeah.
not when you start it. That's when you start increasing weight and
Yeah.
strength, right? And I'll have my itty bitties, right, my level twos, already learning, hang cleans with PVC pipes,
Yeah.
right?
Fair.
But they've also already learned fundamentals of squats. So I think the ultimate, if I had to put it into one thing, it's hip hinging, right?
Mm.
Hip hinging is the ultimate. That's where we get our jumping power from. That's where we tuck. That's where we kick out. It's all hip hinging. So if I had to give one exercise to give, I would give good mornings, right?
Mm.
Where elbows locked behind your head, knees locked, right? And just with a tight, straight back, hip hinging back up, hip hinging back up. This is where everything's going to come from. This is where your box jumps are going to come from. This is where your kettlebell swings, your cleans, your snatches, everything's going to come from that. But
Mm.
if you can't hit right, if you can't hinge at the hip properly, loading the hamstrings, right, the glutes, the lower back, with the right amount of um, force or contraction, right, then you're going to be doing the rest of those movements or jumping movements incorrectly. Um, as far as not so much as getting stronger for the sport, but for safety of the sport,
Yeah.
I would recommend a lot of especially glute med exercises that are
Mm.
responsible for not letting the knees cave in,
Yep.
because when the athletes are jumping on the trampoline, trampoline kind of automatically, because of the way it bows,
Mm,
pushes the knees and the hips and the ankles inwards, right? And if you don't have enough, if you don't have strong enough, glute, and if your glute med is not strong enough to withstand those forces, right, the knees are going to concave.
right.
Um, so some exercises for that. I mean, there's a bazillion, but right, as simple as what do you call them? Sidewalks, monster
Lateral
walks,
and
right?
side walks, right?
Yeah, anything
Side
laterally, right,
plank
with a
stuff. Yep.
band. Yeah, single leg, side planks, uh, fire hydrants, right? Where you go on your hands and knees like a dog peeing on a fire hydrant. I don't know
Yep.
what the technical term is for that exercise, but we call
We
them
like
fire
that one. No
hydrants.
worries.
Um,
Yeah,
but
and
yes.
I think on that too, the other thing I learned from actually you and Camilla when I first met you, Power Monkey, but then also working with Camilla a little bit, and then watching you guys, try to troubleshoot issues is, I think actually the flexibility demands are more demand. That doesn't sound right. Are more intense on some trampolinists than they are on artistic gymnastics because, like for a double pike, for example, you don't have to get that deep into a double pike to like get to a round, right? Or like you don't have to like
Mhm.
if your arms aren't completely straight overhead, you can kind of whip it around or like find a way around it. You don't really have that luxury in trampoline, right? If your arms can't go overhead and you don't have the shoulder flexibility or your hips don't open fully and you don't have the hip flexibility or your pike isn't good or your tuck isn't good, it's going to like launch you in the wrong direction. So I've always
Right.
noticed that I think that flexibility is even more important on trampoline because of that. No?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as far as our sport goes as well, right? So, like, our execution judges are only looking at three things. That's it. They're looking at your position, right? The tuck and the pike, or if it's straight. They're looking at your opening, if it's at 12 o'clock, right? And then
Mm,
you also have to hold until you're parallel to the ground,
mm,
parallel to the trampoline, right? Straight body, complete straight body. So, like, 33% of your score is that pike position, right? So not only is it important, for your rotation, but it's important for your score as well. 30, that's literally 33% of your score.
mm.
And as far as like shoulder mobility, that's where we get into to consistency of the jump, right? If your arms are not flexible enough to hit 180 degrees, you're gonna have to compensate somewhere else,
Mm.
right? And so if you don't learn to compensate somewhere else, then you're going to start flying all over the trampoline because you're like a broken arrow, right? You
Yeah.
imagine a bow and arrow, it's broken, it's going to fly like this,
Mm.
right? And if you do learn to compensate, great, you get to learn to stay in the middle, but you're going to have issues later on, whether
Yeah.
it's from your lower back or your knees,
Yeah.
right? You're compensating somewhere. So yeah, that flexibility is super important, hamstring flexibility for your positions and shoulder flexibility for your takeoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think of you and Camilla and the other trampolinists I've worked with, right? Like shoulder, like neck and like low back type stuff seems to be like huge complaints. And I think a lot of that comes from sometimes like that flexibility gets out of the way. But when kids are younger and stuff, as you mentioned, like people are nervous to start weightlifting, but like properly done weightlifting, and especially like with eccentrics and stuff like that, is actually one of the best ways to try to improve that and like solidify that flexibility when they're going through puberty. And in artistic gymnastics, this happens so much as kids get like 10, 11, 12 years old, they start going through puberty, they tighten up quite a bit. And because maybe the priority isn't on flexibility, strength conditioning, and just fundamentals and basics, those kids get trashed, right? They go through those 2 or 3 years where their growth plates get like totally start to have like real bad cranky issues, but also like they just don't feel so happy because their skills aren't coming along. They're super frustrated. It's like, I can't do what I used to do, man. This sucks, right? So I think if you can build it in them early to, flexibility, strength, physical prep, basics, technical stuff, I think a lot of kids would maybe not get so burnt out through those like 4 or 5 years where they're growing quite a bit.
Yeah, and I learned this from you way back when at Power Monkey Camp, and I think you used the wrist for an example of the difference. I don't know if you used called it flexibility versus mobility or what
Yeah.
which words you used, right? But like, and I give this to the example to the kids all the time. It's like, are you flexible enough to hit 90 degrees?
Mm,
Yes, you are. Are you strong enough to hold 90 degrees? Right. So just because you're flexible enough doesn't mean you
right.
have strength in those positions, right? So like, if someone has the flexibility to hit 180 degrees on their in their shoulders, right? That's great. Are you
Mm,
strong enough to hold it there while you're hitting whatever how many G forces,
yeah.
in the bottom of the trampoline?
Yeah, and particularly with shoulders too, right? Like you were talking about how important like the glute strength is to keep the hips open and not let the knees cave in. But I find a lot of people in artistic and trampoline are underdeveloping like their upper back and like their scap strength because
Yeah.
that
Oh
is
yeah.
what pulls your shoulders completely open. And when you hit the tramp, if
Right.
you're weak in your upper back, it's gonna buckle you quite a bit.
Yeah, and I remember as an athlete looking back and I had no clue, right? Like I always had this like this knot in between my shoulder blades that was terrible. And every time I would hit the trampoline, it would like take my breath away, and it was just awful. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? Right? Like, why do I have this in my upper back? And now, like in hindsight, I did zero. I did no rowing. I did no pulling. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I did do some pull ups from time to time, but like we're like, oh, we're trampoline. We don't need much upper body. And
Yeah.
like I would do all lower back exercises and zero upper body, and like and my upper body was my upper back right around my scap was like nowhere near strong enough
Yeah.
to withstand the forces that I was putting it through.
Mm. Yeah, I know it's so hard to convince someone to work something that they don't think is like, part of their pro. It's like, oh, I don't need my upper body or my lower body, whatever. But we were just talking about off air, like, the challenges sometimes with rhythmic gymnastics is they're like, oh, I don't need to like, jump as high as I can. I'm pretty good like this. But there's such a huge benefit to being a general athlete before you're a specific gymnast, rhythmic, trampoline, artistic, whatever. So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice I give the younger coaches, and particularly with anyone who's got like some high level potential, is like, the Dan said it on a podcast, the bigger the base, the higher the peak, right? So like build the wide base of strength and flexibility and drills and progressions, and then you can build that someone up over time. Because if not, you keep that base really narrow, you're going to topple that tower over when you get to high level.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a great image to think about, right? Absolutely.
It's good for parents too. Parents can't see anywhere past like the next big fun skill. So sometimes you got to
Right.
convince them a little bit.
And I mean coaches too, right? That's and I think that's one of the issues. I don't know if this I'm jumping on a question too early. Feel like one of the issues with trampoline is that it's so skill based that
Mm,
it's like, okay, we learn the skill. What's the next skill? Learn the skill. What's the
mm,
next skill? Right? It's always the next carrot dangling. That they don't want to, and you can, because it's skill based and it requires strength, but if you can get away with pushing to the next skill,
mm,
without that strength, right? You can't catch it to Kachev if you don't have the strength, right? In trampoline, you could get away with it. However, you're putting yourself in danger, or risk of injury, right? So,
mm,
like in trampoline, you can get away with that, and so um, the coaches will just push, be like, oh, he's doing it, she's doing it, okay, let's move. Oh, they're doing the required progressions, let's go for it, right? And there's no association between how much strength you really need to perform this skill,
mm,
right? Like
right.
there's no number, right? It's not like, oh, you need to be able to do 20 leg lifts, with straight
Yeah.
legs to be able to safely do a double back pike, right? And the coaches, and to be fair, right, there's nothing out there right now that says this equals this, and you kind of have to go by experience for your own athletes as to
Mm,
how strong do they need to be ready for this next skill, right? And
yeah.
so um coaches are just like, all right, you're doing the progressions, next skill, doing the progressions, next skill. You're obviously strong enough if you're doing the progressions, and yeah, you're strong enough to do the skill, but are you strong enough that if you mess up, that you can safely recover or not injure yourself?
And strong enough to survive like weeks and weeks of practice, right? It's not just like one
And
or two.
repetition.
Yeah, it's like such high cumulative load that you have over and over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's one of the things that draws people to our sport is like, oh, you could do a half out. You don't need much more strength to do a Rudy out. What's an extra full twist at the end, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you can learn so much faster, and that's what drew me, from artistic, to trampoline. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can learn back tuck. Oh my gosh, I can learn back pike. Oh my gosh, next week I'm learning a back straight. And it's like you can learn so much more faster. Whereas like in gymnastics, I'm like, okay, handstand hold, squeeze, 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 come down. All right, handstand hold, squeeze, 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 come down. Right, and it's all that stuff is necessary. That I feel like people in TNT maybe skip out on.
4 years to get your giants. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So let's kind of say someone has done that, right? They're doing their homework, flexibility, strength. It's all good. And at Power Monkey, I watch you do like, it's incredible how well you break it down for people who are like, those people have never seen trampoline in their life, but you have
Yeah.
really good like systematic progressions for certain skills that I think people really like want to see double backs or like the first time they do one and a half and stuff. So can you maybe pick like one or two skills that you see in the community, like everyone's trying to rush to those skills because they're really big, and then maybe offer a couple of your go-to progressions for what people could probably use?
Whew, I mean, would you
I
at the
was gonna
lower or
pitch
the
you a
higher level?
let's go lower level first. I was gonna pitch you a softball, but I don't really know where a skill would fall in terms of like appropriate or not. So I don't know, like first back, a back tuck. Is that like a big thing for a little kid to do the first time or so? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, so we'll take a back tuck for instance. So everything basically is broken down into quarters in trampoline, right? And we have this system that it works very well. There are some exceptions, but it starts with 1 quarter, right? So backdrop, right, from the head to the back, 1 quarter, 4 quarters, and a full rotation of a flip.
Mhm.
um, if the athlete is not performing backdrops properly, they should not be moving to the next skill, right? And I can't tell you, I literally just came back from a state clinic, and I can't tell you how many times I had to correct a backdrop of people, kids that were like level 8, 9, and 10,
Mm.
right? So if you're not getting the right amount of rotation in the right positions in the right way on a backdrop, then you're going to use the same incorrect forces to rotate you for a back tuck, right?
Mm.
So the things I'm looking for specifically in a backdrop: are they spotting forwards? Are they lifting with their chest first before they start to rotate backwards? And then are they rotating with their toes and hips, right? By
Mhm.
lifting the toes up. A lot of times what you'll see is the athlete, maybe they're spotting, but they're also leaning back with their head and their shoulders, right? Next step, backdrop, pull over to doggy drop. This is usually done from standing still. Athletes stand with their hands up, they fall to their back. The only issue with this one is that the athletes are now falling backwards instead of going upwards. However, it's for safety reasons that they're not jumping, right? Because
Mm.
now this is the first time they're going upside down and
Yeah.
backwards. So funny stuff happens, they could do a bazillion backward rolls, but if they start doing a jumping backdrop pullover,
Yeah.
they go to
Instincts,
handstand, they look
instincts kick in.
backwards,
Yeah.
like they kick their feet forwards, but they're looking backwards, right? Scary stuff starts, here when they start to go upside down for the first time, backwards. So standing still, falling to the back, and then rotating with their toes over. The backdrop pullover is essential, and it's such an incredible drill because once the athlete's on their back, they can't throw their head back. They can no longer lean backwards. Their back is pressed up against the trampoline. They have to learn to rotate with the toes and the hips to flip them over.
Mm.
Otherwise, they're not going to flip over, right? So
Right.
it kind of forces them to do this. Once the athletes learned from standing still, then we learn from jumping, backdrop, pullover. Depending on the athlete and the age, sometimes they'll go to their hands and knees, sometimes they'll go to the feet.
Yep.
Then jumping backdrop pullover with a shape. Once they've done it, kind of an open position, learning to rotate with the toes. So they learn to rotate with the toes, get into the shape. Usually 99% of the time it's tuck, and then learning to slide with their hands down by their side to landing.
Mm.
And then lastly, for the back tuck, I don't know if it's lazy or scared, right? But it, it has to be 99% of the time, even if they're older and bigger, it has to be hand spotted, right? Because otherwise they're like, oh my gosh, I did the drills, but now I have to go over backwards. They're going to start leaning backwards. They're going to
Right.
start throwing their head backwards, right? And honestly, if they're strong enough and they've done their drills and progressions, they're probably strong enough and capable to do it, right? But weird stuff happens up here,
Here.
so what you're going to do as a coach is most of the time I'm not assisting them in the backflip, it's the exact opposite. I'm holding their upper back right between their shoulder blades to make sure that their chest is going up and not launching them backwards, and that
Mm.
they're rotating by bringing their knees up. As far as exercises, right? So athletes, coaches to do the typical leg lifts with straight legs, but I feel like a really important drill that's neglected is right. We call it knees to forehead, a tuck to leg lift. In
Mm.
CrossFit, they do knees to elbows.
Yep.
You don't really need to get to the elbows when you're trying to mimic more in gymnastics.
Yep.
Knees towards the forehead. So not only are the athletes lifting their knees up in a tuck position, but they're also rotating their hips, up in front of them. And also look, are they strong enough to do that? If they're not strong
Yeah.
enough to bring their knees up and rotate their hips up, like,
Yeah.
should they really be doing a back tuck? Because if they're not strong enough to get the rotation from the right forces from the right muscle group, then they're going to be compensating and leaning backwards to compensate somewhere else, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. That's
so
good. That was
does
pretty
that
good.
hit it?
That was
Okay.
perfect. I felt like I know exactly what's going on. I want to go back to because this is what happens in artistic, right? If someone is nervous about spotting, typically the best ways to do it are like learn on very small people who are just easy to work with.
Yes.
Double
Yeah.
spot, right? Like go through drills and progressions. Like don't just be like, all right, I guess I'll give it a whirl with this 10-year-old who's learning a back tuck for the first time or whatever age. But like I think
Yeah.
that's where people maybe don't do their homework is going to the gym for a half hour with a level 2, right? Or a level 1, just being like, just hold really tight and let me flip you around and like where to put my hands and someone can teach me and spot me. Then right, learning to bounce
Mhm.
the trampoline right correctly with them.
Right. Yeah, and that's probably So two things that, if you're looking, if you're a coach listening to this and you want to learn to spot on the trampoline, right? So there's two things, right? Probably the biggest issue or biggest flaw with people trying to spot on the trampoline is learning to bounce with another human, right? All it takes is a split second that you guys hit differently for one person to get double
Hinging?
bounced, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And hopefully it'll be the coach that gets double bounced because they're much heavier, they won't go flying, right? But if it's the kid, you're gonna be like, why is this kid going up so high, right? Um, so what some things that you could do for that is jumping with a smaller child, 5 6 7 years old. And what I'll do is hold them under the armpits, stand behind them, right, and put them between your knees, so you're kind of grasping them, so if anything does happen, you have their armpits and your knees are clamping them at the hips,
Yep.
so right, you can have them just in case. And you kind of jump in, almost feels like a pogo stick, right? Like you're holding something between the legs and the
I
legs,
saw
and
you
you
do
just
this
kind of feel.
with Dave's daughter at camp,
Yeah,
BJ's daughter.
yeah, exactly. Right, and then you can kind of move to the side, which is a little more challenging, but again, you hold them at the armpit, the shoulder, or around the bicep, one hand on their back, or you can reach around to the armpit on the other side, and you're trying to learn to bounce back, with them at the same time. And then usually what happens is you're jumping together, and let's say you're going on three for a back tuck, one, two, and then on three, you kind of give them a slight double bounce,
Mm.
uh, to make them go up just a little bit higher, so you have more control, the more time in the air, and that just to make sure that you don't kill the bounce. The worst thing you could do is when they're going for a back tuck, you kill their bounce, and now
Oh,
you're going up, they're going down, and they're trying to rotate, right? So it's just like the
terrifying.
worst, right? So number one, learning to bounce with another human being on the trampoline, start light. Number two, learning how to spot off of the trampoline, right? So what I did a long time ago is I taught people, little kids standing back tucks that were like 5 6 years old, just jump, up. I'd take their shoulder, jump up, jump to your back, and then catch them like a baby in a tuck position, right? And you could use this elbow, kind of tuck their head in if their head's leaning backwards, and then you start to roll them, grab the hips on the side, and you learn that kind of hip roll, right, where
Yep.
you're holding. And then eventually you'll see them spotting doubles. They'll come around, catch the hips, and roll them over. I don't know if that's something they do in artistic on the floor, but in power
Yep.
tumbling, that's something that's super common, right? Double
Yep.
backs, grab the hips, roll them over. And that's where it originates. And I got super comfortable learning that hip roll
I
there.
think I think that's a better way to do it too, because the hip roll, when you finish, you're on your arms across their body and you can slow them down. The worst thing you can do is just bump somebody and be like, all right, good luck, right? And they over rotate and they smash their head against the ground. So that's recommended for
Right.
all types of gymnastics.
Right. Yeah. 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 I agree. So yeah, those are two things: learn to jump, and secondly, learn to spot on the floor with someone light, maybe over a soft mat, so you're not
Cool.
adding jumping to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. And I think I don't really know where this will fall in like kind of lower level or higher level, because like I'm still kind of a noob with trampoline timelines and stuff. But I feel like talking about twisting would probably be pretty important too before we move on to like some like the super high level stuff. So can you go through a
Yeah.
similar kind of idea of progressions for twisting airplanes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I remember.
So, yeah. Boom. So, the skills. Okay. So we talked about quarters, right? Um, the same thing. So we went from backdrop 1/4, and then pull over 3/4, and then back tuck 4/4. Twisting starts at 1/4, right? Actually, I'm sorry, twisting starts at 0/4, right?
Yeah.
So like we learn a full turn, but honestly, like the coaches, and it's really hard to see with the eye if the athletes are turning the right way. The first way you're going to learn the athletes are going to learn to twist properly is swivel hips, seat turn seat, right?
Mm.
And so everyone does this, but I feel like you don't teach the mind body connection to the athletes, right? And then when you explain to the athletes, hey, you're standing up, turning your toes, and then which will turn your hips,
Right.
they start to get that mind body connection a little bit. So like, aha, okay, I'm not just turning and looking over my shoulder to turn with my shoulders. Now, can you turn with your shoulders? Everyone's like, oh, turn with your hips, but this I can do my Rudy like this, and it's so fast, and it's like, does it work? Yes, absolutely, 100%. You could twist it with your shoulders. Yes. Is it as efficient? No.
Yeah.
Right? Will it translate into your double twisting double back or your Rudy out? No, your Rudy out or your double twisting double back will not be as efficient if you're learning to twist with your shoulders.
Mm.
So after swivel hips, the next step we can do is seat doggy Superman turn, and this is done on the ground, and probably artistics. probably artistic coaches do this every day for the warm up. TNT coaches sometimes do it for their conditioning, right? Superman, roll over to hollow,
Mm.
right? We call it hot dogs. And so the athletes have to learn and pay attention as coaches from the Superman position. Are they rolling with their shoulders first, or are they lifting their heels, turning their heels, which turn their hips, and then they turn their shoulders second as a secondary force? And so then they'll do seat, doggy, Superman in the air and do the same exercise in the air, turning with the feet, right? And
Mm.
then eventually you can teach that same position as seat, Superman, arms out in front, lifting the heels, turn to the back without the hands and knees, the doggy drop, right? So now they're learning to rotate and then turn with their heels. And you'll notice if they're learning to turn with if they're trying to turn with their shoulders, they're probably going to try to turn off of the bed.
Mm.
They're going to end up doing like a swivel hip. So not going to make it to their back. So that's a good. And then the next step after that is to add a position, right? So seat drop, tuck,
Mm.
slide arms down, and then turn with the feet and shoulders to the back, right? So they're going from their butt forwards to their stomach, and then with the shape opening and turn. So they're learning shape comes first, then opening, then the twist. So they're not trying to twist too early, which sometimes you'll see them learning in a branny, right? They take off, they twist like a round off right away off the trampoline bed,
Mm.
right? And then once they've done this in the tuck and the pike position, then you can make it more challenging, make it 2/4. Instead of from a seat drop position, they're going to go from a back drop position. From their back, now they're going forward to their stomach, tuck, slide their arms down, turn with their feet and shoulders to their back.
Mm.
A lot of big, when I do this drill at clinics, a lot of people are asking, should they land flat back? Should they land legs up? That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter how they're landing, as long as their torso and their head are on the trampoline. The most important part is that, are they doing everything in the right order? Position, opening, twisting, and are they twisting with their heels into their hips? And then as far as going backwards goes, same thing. 1/4 airplane is no longer is in the level 6 routine. It was in the level 6 routine, but everyone's like, oh, it's a skill. Half turn to belly, half turn to belly, and
Mm.
they're totally missing the biomechanics behind it. Right? Lift the toes, turn the toes, and then turn to their stomach. And
Mm.
there's a ballet move. Can't remember the name of it. I talked about it at Congress, and there was a coach in the chat that told me how to corrected me, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it is.
I'm
But
sure we'll hear about it in the
maybe,
comment section.
yeah, I'm sure all the ballet teachers. How do you not know that basic move, right? And so essentially, if the athlete is twisting to the left, they're going to kick their right foot. Okay. They're going to lift their right foot. They're going to keep looking at their foot. Imagine my hand is my foot. They're going to turn their foot, which turn their hips, and then they're going to end up facing the opposite way in an arabesque or scale position, right?
Mm.
So they're looking and lifting the toes, turn the whole body, right? Land arms by the ears in a scale, arabesque, whatever you want to call it, position. Right, that's a good drill on the ground, and then they're going to do the same thing on trampoline. Right, lift the toes, spot the toes, turn the toes, which turn the hips, and then turn to the stomach. A drill that I'll use is I'll take a pool noodle, because whether you're an artistic or TNT coach teaching an Arabian, the biggest flaw is that they're going to rush with their
Right.
shoulders right away and try to spot too quickly. So what
Right.
I'll do is I'll take a pool noodle, put it in front of them for the airplane, and it's usually about 45 degrees. Right? Imagine this marker is the pool noodle. The athlete has to kick the noodle first, and then they're able to turn.
Mm.
Right? And then when it's come time to do an Arabian, what do they have to do? They have to kick harder to generate more force, right? So instead of putting the noodle down here, I'll put the noodle higher. So they have to really kick harder, turn, and then flip.
Right.
And so, yeah, so those are basically the two, twisting forwards and twisting backwards, drills at the very basics that I feel like are skipped.
I dig it. That's super important. I can't move on without asking this question. Do you think that a hot dog is a sandwich?
No, and I'll tell you why.
This is an important mid-podcast break, and I can't wait for Becky's clip to go viral on social media when we have a fierce debate about this.
A hot dog is not okay. First, in order to know if it's a sandwich or not, define sandwich.
A sandwich for me, I say, is geometrically bread top and bottom.
False.
Because do you think that a hot dog is a grinder or like a sub down in Jersey language?
Grinder.
What do you classify a
No.
hot dog as?
You know what? This opens up new doors, okay? Because For me, a sandwich is two pieces of bread with some meat or some substance in the middle, right? And a hot dog is one piece of bread. It's one. It's connected at the bottom,
It's
right?
true.
So if you took one piece of bread and folded it in half, is that a sandwich? I
Uh,
don't know. I feel like
it's not an
I
open
feel like
face
that's a toast, almost a toast, right? But here's the thing. Here's where it gets tricky. What do they call it? They call it a submarine sandwich,
right. I know.
right? So I feel like those people are false advertising. Um, hold on a second. Wait. We gotta
Because when you're ready, I'll tell you the hill that I'm gonna die on, and I think I'll blow your mind.
hold on. I'm doing a little research real quick.
Becky, put in some
What is
Jeopardy music or some like to the eyes
okay,
of
here
the
we go. Webster's dictionary. Sandwich, noun, an item of food consisting of two pieces of bread with meat. There you go. It's not a
That's it.
sandwich. That's
Okay,
it.
it's not a
Problem solved.
sandwich. It's not a sandwich. What do you think it is then? Is it his own category?
Yes. Its own
Okay,
category.
here's
Yep.
my take. And the similar to how I think humans are probably the closest to chimpanzees, I think that if we're gonna put it in a category, a hot dog is a taco
False.
because a taco has three or one connected pieces. I think it's a large, puffy, soft shell taco.
But what is a taco shell made out of versus what is a hot
Corn
dog
or
bun made
flour,
out of?
corn or flour, right?
Right. And a hot dog bun is usually wheat.
Right. Depending on the
Yeah,
argument of the
so
but we could
not the
morph it.
same thing.
Come on,
Not the same thing.
there's a lot of like, gluten-free options for different breads
Uh,
and stuff.
similarities. It is similarities, but it's
I
not a
saw
taco.
I saw a picture from like a physicist from MIT that had like a geometric breakdown of like three sides equals taco, one equals sandwich. So I don't know. We'll get this debate settled. I'll put an Instagram poll up when this clip.
Yeah, put a poll up. But no, I mean everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But if you think it's a sandwich, you're wrong.
That's amazing. All right, back to trampolining.
Okay.
So now back to our regular scheduled programming. So, all right, I think we got lower level stuff. We got basic flip, strength, conditioning, flexibility, all that good jazz. Let's talk about high level stuff. So I'm sure a lot of people want to know the goods from, real high level stuff. So let's say coaches have some talented kids. They're looking at high level stuff. Let's talk about, okay, what's the next? So say we're past like this is fun. I just want to do like casual trampolining. What do you think are the kind of that barrier level of like, you need to have these skills mastered to kind of be considered like working successfully in the higher ends of, trampolining?
I mean, I think trampoline and tumbling does a very good job of mapping out the skills needed since it's I don't want to say it's less creative, but there's less artistry, than artistic gymnastics, because we're limited to flip and twist,
Right.
and that's it, right?
Right.
There's no, but you grab this way, or you can grab that way, do the same skill, but catch here, So there's a lot less artistry. So I think USA Gymnastics does a good job with their levels leading up to it, and also this is a good PSA for TNT coaches. There's also a document and slideshow of mobility skills that demonstrate these are not part of the routines, but you should be doing these skills in between or to
Mhm.
progress from level 9 to level 10, right? And so basically to go over maybe some of those
Yeah.
skills, it's 7/4 rotation, so you can do those in two ways, right? So it's a double front to flat back, and basically the reason being, and it's especially this skill is especially important if you have a pit, because 9 times out of 10 the athletes are skipping this step and they're just learning the skill into the pit, and then once, and it's not if, it's when they start to have a block or a little bit of self-doubt, they have nothing to fall back on, right?
Mm.
And that 7/4 is a double front to the back, and it's lands in the flat back for two reasons. Number one, to mimic the same sliding position that you'll mimic when you do your half out double front with a half twist, right? And also, if you have an improper takeoff or an improper timing in the kick out, you're going to land, instead of flat back, you're going to land up over rotated to a seat drop, or you're going to under rotate and do the worm and do a kaboom with your heels on the trampoline, right? So if this athlete is learning to land perfectly on their back flat, then that athlete has a good understanding of where they are in the air, right? Did they rush to take off a little bit? Ooh, they did. But do they understand that now I'm going too fast? I should open earlier, right? Or did they get a little stuck? Oh, they did. do they understand they should hold their tuck a little tighter, a little longer to land on their
Mhm.
back, right?
Right.
So in whether the athlete is learning when the athlete is learning a double somersault, which is usually when the athletes are kind of making that decision, is like, I want to be really competitive, and because they learn a double somersault now at level 9, which in artistic gymnasts are probably like, level 9, no, that's when they get serious. It's like, well, you can go through the skills or the levels relatively fast in TNT, because if you could do a back pike, you could probably do a back tuck, you could probably do a back pike
Mm,
within 6 months, right?
right.
It's just, do they have the strength and flexibility for it? Um, so that is probably one of the staple for the doubles.
Mm,
Because once you can go from there, eventually you do your double front and you open a little bit earlier and you can spot the ground. And then from there, it's just that same drill at a half twist, right? Branny, the athlete's been doing brannies for years, right? Then that branny turns into a Rudy. Hopefully, by the time they get to the double front Rudy, a Rudy out, they've
mm,
been doing, that drill for that Rudy for years. But it all comes from that double front to back. And a lot of times the athletes, the coaches are nervous to teach this skill because it comes relatively close to the head, right? The
mm.
athletes are upside down and then they're landing on their back. And it's scary, right? It's scary for the athletes. It's scary for the coaches. And one thing that sometimes I'll teach, if they're super, super scared, if you don't have, you could teach that skill still to the pit, that double front to back, but I'll teach double front to seat drop on a big fluffy. If you don't have a marshmallow mat, then maybe an 8-incher, right? And then they lay down, right? And
Mm,
eventually they'll do double front to seat drop, lay down, and then eventually they're going to be able to lay down immediately.
right.
And another drill for that is seat drop, doggy on their hands and knees, and then they'll do front tuck to feet, put their hands down, like kind of like a bear crawl position, and then roll. So they're
Yep.
doing seat doggy flip immediately into like a roll, and eventually they look, hands down, roll, look, hands down, roll, and eventually they're going seat doggy flip to feet, and then duck under to their back.
Mm,
This shortens the number of quarters, right? Because they're already in a doggy position. Their torso is facing the trampoline, so it's less quarters of rotation. So it's a little bit easier for the athletes, and also they feel safer when they're closer to the trampoline, not so
right,
high up, starting on their
right.
feet. So that's another good drill that works for most athletes, but not for all.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's very good. And I think this is probably more my brain curiosity wise, but I'm sure people too, is when you're starting to dance to like crazy stuff like half and half outs or like, Rudy out, stuff like that. Are you using progressions that are similar to trying to get the air awareness and get the timing and stuff like that? Obviously, these athletes are more advanced. They're probably comfortable with some of the stuff. But like when you get to some high, like an artistic, I get this way sometimes because you're like, okay, yeah, we can do a double double into the pit. We can then put a mat into it. We can then like slowly build it up. We can still spot somebody pretty well. But I don't know. I imagine you can't really do the same thing as much with like crazier skills in trampoline. So how are you starting the progressions or getting into that first like, gut dropping moment of like, all right, let's try half and half out or try Rudy out or something like that?
it's all progressions, right? So I don't feel like there's ever that feeling, really, honestly, of,
Mm,
ooh, are we gonna try this, right? And I feel like if you are in that point as a coach, like, then they're not ready, right?
yeah.
Then you should probably reach out and look for some more progressions, right? And so let's take half and half out, for example. And so essentially they'll learn 1/4 airplane, right? 3/4 airplane spot, duck under to back. 4/4 Arabian to feet, right?
Mm,
5/4 Arabian front up to stomach. Um, They'll also break the skill up into two bounces, right? So Arabian to back, and then a branny ball out from back, which
mm,
equals 8/4. It breaks up that double somersault in two. You can also do Arabian to feet, punch, branny, tuck.
mm,
So they're getting that feeling in double. Then you do Arabian after the 5/4 comes 7/4, Arabian double front to back. By this time, they've already have half out and double front to back so many times
right.
that 7/4 is like, that's like they know it like the back of their hand. So
Mm,
now they're going Arabian 7/4 to flat back, and that should be like, feel like cake. And you keep having them do that until you see that they can do Arabian double front and spot while they're going upside down, right? If they can spot the trampoline, then it's like, okay, they're like 9 times out of 10, they're like, I feel ready, right? And it's just
mm,
Arabian double front, spot, brandy over the top, right? But you have to go 1/4, 2 and 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, building all the way up. And then 8/4 broken up into two jumps um, before they try the skill.
Yeah, that makes sense. That made sense to me. I think it helped me clear it out. But yeah, it seems like with artistic gymnastics and trampoline
Mhm.
together, there's probably someone out there who can help you, who can give you that exact progression that you need. Like if it feels like a mountain you're going to climb to teach this kid a half and half out, you probably want to find some mentorship or find someone to maybe just break down exactly what to do. Because like you said, you should never have that like, oh my God moment. Like, is this going to be okay?
Right. No, absolutely. And I feel like there are a lot of people in TNT that have that reach out to various coaches. And I have tons of people texting me, emailing me, be like, "Hey, what's this progression?" Or, "Hey, check this out. Send me a video." Send me a video. They're like, "What is this? Do they look ready? Am I missing a step?"
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like in old school gymnastics, it's like if you're asking, then you don't know,
Mhm.
and right, like you should be at the lower levels, and
Yeah.
someone has to learn at some point, right? And so now we have this more, all inclusive community in at least in TNT. I'm not, maybe it's, I hope it's
It's
getting that
getting
way
there.
in artistic
Getting there. Yeah.
gymnastics, that people are sharing their ideas with
Mhm.
other coaches, and I feel like the coaches are a lot more open now. Even myself, I'm watching and I'll see a drill that I don't do and be like, interesting, why do you do that, how do you get there? So I'm happy that the community is growing that way. And this is your invitation, coaches. If you don't do that already, reach out to a club that's maybe nearby or that you know of that has higher level coaches, and send them videos, text them, ask them. They'll
Yeah.
be more than happy to help.
Yeah. Just go hang for a day, right? Just like go hang there and watch
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. Literally. Yeah.
And I'm interested to know now, I guess, so with higher level athletes that are doing like, 9, 10 elite stuff like that, maybe you can share from your experience too as an athlete is what percentage, like how does the time allotted in like a week's worth of practice, like what percentage do you feel as though is spent on actual tramp and skill time versus what's on physical prep versus what's on warm up cool down versus what's on weight training, weightlifting? Because I think that's the hardest thing I think a lot of people are dealing with is the landscape of gymnastics is shifting quite a bit in terms of like using weight training and using stuff and not going so aggressive with skill time. But people are like, all right, where's the boundary there between getting enough skill and tramp time and developing that, but also off tramp stuff?
Yeah. That's a loaded question, right? There's like,
35
uh,
answers. Yeah.
I mean, uh, the answer to that question depends on where they at in their career in their season,
Yeah.
right? So I feel like in our gym we don't have, we have a bar, and we have, I think, a few sets of tens. So these athletes aren't lifting. We don't have access to heavier loads,
Mhm.
right? Now the loads are, these external loads are something, right? Um, but they're not what I would want them to do,
For,
these higher levels. Um, so our elite athletes train 6 days a week for 3 hours at a time. They'll usually do a 30-minute warm up, which will include a lot of, what do you call it? Like proactive physical
Prehab
therapy,
stuff. Yeah.
prehab, right? Prehab, a lot of prehab stuff, right? A lot of it kind of doubles up as accessory work, right?
Mhm.
Strength, building strength and positions, as something as simple as therabands, right? If you know what crossover symmetry is, we
Yep.
use something similar to crossover symmetry with therabands, where the athletes are pulling, backwards, trying to strengthen their scap. Um, so that 30 minutes is built of with muscle memory of rolls, light tumbling, prehab stuff. Then they're on the equipment for, at the elite level, since they're not doing tumbling and double mini. They're on for hour and a half, 2 hours on the trampoline, which I feel like is what kind of sets our gym apart. Is we have 7 trampolines at our gym. We have access to that, whereas a lot of coaches do not have access to that amount of equipment time. And then we'll usually, depending on the time of the year, we'll do 30 to 60 minute strength and conditioning. Now that strength, we'll do strength and conditioning every single day, um, whether that's traditional calisthenics, leg lifts, v-ups, sprints. um, Sometimes, leading up to competition, it might be that calisthenics 6 days a week, right? Or maybe 20 minutes of that. And then on our heavy days in the summer, we'll do like an hour, even an hour and a half, because that's our like off season.
Right.
After our national championships, they'll be doing 3 to 5 days of external loading. Granted, that loading isn't something that's like crushing them, right? Like, from myself as an athlete, I was doing it I was doing like heavy squatting probably 3 days a week.
Mhm.
Whereas these athletes aren't really getting heavy external loads. And the best thing that I've done, that I've kind of led the athletes to do for this external loading, is loading with their partners, loading with another athlete, right? So the athlete sits on their shoulders with the stall bars, and this is not perfect, but this is what we've done, and
Make do with
with
what
what
you
we're
got.
given.
Yeah.
And the athletes will have the pull-up bar, and I'll say, okay, try your best to know 50% of your body weight in a pull-up position, and the athletes are doing a hold with 50% of their partner's body weight. It's like, okay, then a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, it's like, okay, 75%, right? And then whatever, a few weeks later, okay, now I want you to hold that whole entire body weight on your shoulders. Got it? Okay, now that and then it's like, then we'll do, okay, you know, quarter squat external load, half squat external load. Mind you, they are still doing full range of motion, like full depth squats, just not with external load. Because I honestly, because I don't trust them to guide how much weight.
Totally.
So
Totally.
it's like, so in that case, that is why we do shortened range of motion
Yeah.
progressions, right? Like quarter squat, half squat, 3/4, and then full depth they'll do with partners. Um, and that's usually 30 to 60. In the summer, it's 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the last 15 minutes is usually done for static stretching or rehab if they
Yep.
do have some kind of issue with their ankles or knees that they need to take care of, right? If it's knees, they're doing couch stretch, right? Soft tissue work for the quads,
Yep.
stretching the quads, right? Ankle, their work. If they have ankle issues, they're doing calf work. And you know what? Sometimes that's not only stretching. Sometimes it's also some extra exercises that they need
Yep.
for whatever joint it is that they're trying to attack.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful. I think that gives people a really good, like, kind of like timeline to follow in during a daily practice. So, yeah, I think I just have a couple more things to get through. And I think more on the bigger picture questions now is, I guess for you, having been such a high level athlete and now stepping into a coaching role and obviously on the junior team role, are there things that you've had a perspective change at all from like when you were an athlete? Like you looked at things like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. And then now as a coach, like, oh, you know what? That actually, I maybe didn't really think that went through 100%. Or are there things that you've seen change quite a bit in the last 10 years as you've transitioned over to more of a coaching role?
Yeah, I mean, from an athlete to a coach, there's a lot of drills and progressions that I did not do
Mm,
that I wish I had done. The last year on the last 2 years of my career, I started doing progressions, right? And it's like,
nice.
in that year I learned 6 new triple somersaults,
Mm,
6 different triples,
wow.
right? So
Crazy.
like, had I done those before, then who knows what I would have done in my career. But I was brought up in the Soviet style, where it's like you basically learn through repetition. It's like, do it. That wasn't quite right, try it again. Do it, right? That right, all right. And you just keep doing it until you get it right. Then once it's right, you just do it a bazillion times.
Mm,
um and like anatomy and physiology, like I had no clue what to do, right? There's like prehab, what, right?
yeah.
Like I need to strengthen my back. Why? I need, right?
Yeah.
Like everything, like everything is new as a coach that I didn't do as an athlete. Um, I feel like the only thing that I do the same of is like routine composition and like skills, but
Yeah.
like everything off, not everything, a lot of stuff like conditioning, flexibility, mobility is different. A lot of the stuff that I've learned through you, and then the progressions is something completely
Yeah.
new as well.
I remember that
But
was our first
yeah,
conversation at Powerman Camp. You're like, "My neck really hurts." And I was like, "We should probably fix your shoulders." You're like, "Huh, go on." And I was like, "No one's ever told you this before?" You're like, "Yeah, that's
yeah,
probably important."
yeah, exactly. Like and I had no one explain to me, like, so I had neck issues going, like herniated discs in my back, and no one even asked. And not that I went to so many doctors, but no one said, how's your T-spine mobility?
Yeah.
Like, not even one person. Right now I'm like, your neck's hurting, well, let me see, how can you rotate, can you bend forwards, can you bend backwards, land this foam roller.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's take this, let's check this out. But this is all stuff that I've also learned as a coach, that I wish I had learned as an athlete.
Sure. Well, you mentioned it, a lot of this stuff before, but if people obviously you're probably a resource and there's a lot of stuff online, like from your sheet. Where's what's the mobility sheet you were talking about? Like, where can people find that? That sounds like a very helpful resource.
Yeah, okay, so this is a PSA to every one of you listening right now, I don't care if you're in TNT, artistic, rhythmic, acro, gymnastics for all, type in www.usagym.org at least 3 times a week.
Mm.
Go to that website. There are so many things there that I'm still like finding like, oh, look at this link that's still here from 2005 that this national team coach posted. I
Yeah.
had no clue, right? Like there's so many things, and in so many ways it feels disorganized, but if you keep visiting it,
Mm.
right, all the time and clicking those sidebars and clicking the side buttons, and you'll see, right? Like educate, right, we have links for education, and under there's education for coaches, for judges, and it's not just courses. It's not just going to bring you to that what do they call it, the university,
University.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's links and videos and forms all over the place, but I feel like a lot of people are maybe a little bit intimidated to go there because it's a lot. But just take a few minutes, a few times a week, go there, check it out, just dig, research, right?
Mm.
um because there's a lot more there than people know. And honestly, if you're an artistic gymnast, go to the TNT side. We have tons of
Mm.
videos and forms and stuff that you can also benefit from.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can do with like honestly 30 minutes per day of like real dedicated education time. Like you can just destroy a month's
Oh
worth of
my gosh, 30 minutes a day. I'm talking like 5-10 minutes a day, 2 times a week. You could get a lot done, right? Like honestly, people are like 30 minutes. That's my lunch break. That's this. I don't want to spend my whole lunch break. It's like you could do it on your phone, right?
yeah,
Like just go to the website and on your phone and start digging.
sure. Absolutely, man. Well, that was super helpful for me, honestly, to rehear that kind of stuff besides just like the firing hose I get once per year when I see you. But I think people really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll get this chopped up and put it up online probably in a couple of weeks. So it'll be out there.
Nice, awesome. Well, then, in that case, I hope everyone had Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays,
Yeah.
Happy New Year. Um,
I was going to
I
wish
hope
you a
everyone
happy
has a
holidays before we came on, but I didn't want to date the episode. But it's perfect now because it's always going to be behind when it comes out.
oh, yes, exactly. Yes,
Um,
and don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote on the hot dog.
yeah.
Poll.
I think it's a
Very
taco.
important. Very important. Top
It's
priority.
definitely not a sandwich, but I think it's a taco.
You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're wrong.
What do you think it is? You never said what you think it is.
It's
You
its
said,
own classification,
oh, okay.
right?
So I guess the
Like,
poll will be, is it a taco or is it its own thing?
yeah, why does it have to be, right? Like, so is it a taco also a sandwich? Like, how many subcategories are we allowed here?
It's
Right? I think a
it's a
taco's its own
unique.
thing. Yeah, a submarine, hoagie, grinder, whatever you want to call it, that's its own thing,
This is the
right?
unicorn of the sandwich land.
Yeah. Is a panini a sandwich?
Is a gyro or a gyro? You know that could obviously is folded a little bit too.
Ooh,
Could be
yeah.
it could be one of those.
That's a wrap. It's a wrap. It's its own separate thing. A wrap. Yeah. Nope.
All right, news.
Separate
Bye,
category.
everybody. See ya.
Bye.